muy buenos días o tardes, ya no sé exactamente qué es lo que se tiene que decir a la 1:20 de la tarde. Muchas gracias a todos por estar aquí. Mis primeras palabras, desde luego, tienen que ser agradecer al Círculo de la Sanidad por esta iniciativa que yo creo que es muy relevante, muy importante, el que formalicemos este tipo de jornadas de reflexión para todos los que amamos un sector que es esencial para el bienestar de los ciudadanos. Y desde luego decir que para mí es un honor estar moderando este panel con 3 personas, con 3 servidores públicos, quiero decir, que han trabajado y trabajan mucho por el bienestar de los ciudadanos de 3 países que compartimos más o menos un mismo modelo sanitario, que es un sistema nacional de salud. Yo creo que Portugal y España imitamos el espíritu y los valores de lo que se implantó ya hace décadas en el Reino Unido, el NHS, y desde luego creo que los 3 países tenemos similitudes y también diferencias en lo que ha sido la evolución del modelo, pero también tenemos algunos retos comunes que creo que es lo que vamos a intentar debatir y hablar en este panel. No vamos a tener presentación porque me gustaría que fuera más una conversación entre nosotros y, desde luego, después que haya la oportunidad también de preguntar. Me gustaría empezar presentando a las 3 personas que están conmigo en este panel. Empezaré por Samantha Jones. Samantha, aparte de ser amiga y durante una época ser colegas, es una persona humilde que me ha pedido que le presentara como una persona que empezó como enfermera hace algunos años, no muchos, pero algunos años, empezó como enfermera, pero que ha desarrollado toda su carrera profesional en el Reino Unido, gestionando hospitales, liderando grupos de atención primaria, inclusive siendo la líder de programas de futuros modelos de salud, con lo cual es una persona que durante toda su carrera profesional ha estado dedicada a la sanidad y a la transformación dentro de la sanidad, a buscar nuevos modelos de gestión e implantar nuevas formas de gestión dentro del NHS. Más tarde fue nombrada advisor del primer ministro y ha estado en los últimos años dentro de Downing Street con el primer ministro Boris Johnson y recientemente, ella me ha dicho que no lo diga, pero lo voy a decir, ha sido galardonada con la Orden del Imperio Británico por los servicios prestados a su país. Pero más importante de todo eso, me ha recalcado que diga que ella es madre de 2 gemelos de 14 años que le hacen tener el foco en la realidad y en lo que pasa todos los días en la vida real. Yo creo que eso, efectivamente, Samantha, es un gran privilegio. A mi lado está Adalberto Campos. Adalberto Campos es una persona con una trayectoria excepcional dentro del mundo de la sanidad portuguesa. Es médico, es profesor universitario en la Escuela Nacional de Salud Pública, está en Nova University en Lisboa, colabora también en la Universidad Europea especialista en salud pública. Fue ministro de Sanidad de nuestro país hermano y vecino desde el año 2015 al 2018. Es miembro de la Academia Nacional de Medicina de Portugal, presidente de diversas instituciones y, desde luego, previo a esto que he dicho, ha participado en diversos y muy numerosos entidades y organizaciones, desde la Cruz Roja, en Portugal. Es una gran personalidad que le agradezco especialmente que haya hecho el esfuerzo de estar con nosotros. Y por último, Elisa Tarazona, que quizá para mí es fácil presentarla, es médico, doctora en medicina, médico de familia. Ella empezó montando la atención domiciliaria en la Comunidad Valenciana, que fue pionera en España en todos los modelos de atención en el domicilio, que ahora parece que es uno de los elementos de futuro, entrar en el domicilio y salir más del hospital y entrar más en el domicilio. Elisa fue en eso una pionera, en eso y en muchas otras cosas. Ella se incorporó a Ribera Salud, fue directora de atención primaria en la FE, luego de ahí pasó a Ribera Salud y ocupó el puesto de adjunto a gerencia para el modelo de integración asistencial en el 2003, cuando se integró la atención primaria a modelo integrado de salud junto con el hospital. Y de ahí pasó a Ribera Salud, fue directora de operaciones y ahora es consejera delegada del Grupo Ribera Salud, grupo que está pues, en 5 comunidades autónomas, en 4 países y asesorando también en diversos países a distintos gobiernos, con lo cual tiene una larga experiencia en gestión de lo público en España y fuera de España. Bueno, después de hacer la presentación, me gustaría hacer una pequeña introducción personal y ya dejarles que hablen ellos. Yo creo que los 3 países que están aquí representados, el Reino Unido, Portugal y España, he dicho que tenemos un modelo de salud muy similar, pero al mismo tiempo también algunas diferencias en cuanto a organización y en cuanto a problemática. Y es verdad que en los 3 países han habido momentos de reflexión sobre qué es lo que se debía de hacer. En los 3 países ha habido momentos en los que distintos gobiernos de ambos colores, políticamente conservadores o políticamente socialdemócratas o laboristas, han reflexionado sobre nuevas fórmulas de gestión, han puesto en marcha nuevas fórmulas de gestión y es verdad que desde mi punto de vista, es lo primero que quiero dejar aquí, esas reflexiones sobre el futuro del Sistema Nacional de Salud pues no han tenido la continuidad que parecía que era importante de hacer en los siguientes años, pensando en los retos que vamos a tener que hacer frente en el futuro. Sin embargo, para mí, el COVID, la tragedia del COVID, supone un antes y un después. Lo que antes era conveniente, lo que antes era importante, lo que antes era, bueno, tener visión de estadista, de futuro, ahora creo que la tragedia del COVID lo ha convertido en imprescindible, innegociable, obligatorio, y creo que es responsabilidad de los gestores públicos y privados, de las entidades públicas y privadas, poner encima de la mesa la necesidad de introducir reformas. Porque yo, desde luego, creo que una coincidencia de toda esta sala es que queremos, seguro todos, una sanidad pública, de calidad, con valores, equitativa, universal, todos los valores tradicionales del Sistema Nacional de Salud, pero también que sea sostenible en el tiempo. Mal haríamos de pensar el que nosotros tengamos y gocemos de una buena sanidad, pero dejemos a nuestros hijos una sanidad peor de la que hemos recibido. Y alguien, algún día, a nivel de España, luego veremos otras realidades, a nivel de España alguien se preguntará el por qué en un sistema nacional de salud con cobertura universal, con equidad, con todos los valores que he dicho del sistema público, hay un 25% de la población que decide sacarse un seguro privado de salud. Algo, en esta nueva sociedad, algo no estará haciendo bien el sistema público para que haya un 25% de ciudadanos que decidan que está muy bien tener una sanidad pública para todos, pero quiero sacarme una póliza de seguro privado. Yo, desde luego, creo que la falta de ambición y valentía de muchos de los políticos actuales nos está llevando, tras el COVID, a este deterioro poco a poco de la sanidad pública y una sanidad privada. Estamos asistiendo pues, cada vez más fuerte en este entorno y, desde luego, pues, una sanidad privada que, para el que se lo pueda permitir, pues, le va a dar pues, unos ventajas desde el punto de vista asistencial que quizá pueden chocar un poco con el concepto de justicia social. Por eso hemos de luchar todos para tener una sanidad pública excelente, de calidad y con los valores de nuestro Sistema Nacional de Salud. Por ello, creo que la necesidad de reformas, de reflexión, es indispensable. La transformación del sistema público va a venir, seguro. La tecnología, la inteligencia artificial, todos estos temas que tenemos encima de la mesa van a obligar a que la falta de profesionales, en fin, lo que vamos a hablar ahora en esta mesa, van a obligar a tomar decisiones, estoy convencido, en la próxima década, si el objetivo es preservar los valores de nuestro Sistema Nacional de Salud. Por eso, estoy convencido que este no es el momento de estar callados. Estoy convencido que este no es el momento de quedarnos en casa. Este es el momento de hablar, es el momento de proponer, es el momento de salir a tener, como estamos teniendo este foro hoy aquí, para los que creemos y estamos convencidos que hay que reformar y transformar el sistema para hacer una sanidad pública del siglo XXI, para una sociedad del siglo XXI, creo que este tipo de foros es importante. Y mi reflexión inicial acaba aquí y ya les doy la palabra a las personas que están en el panel, y me gustaría, Adalberto, que empezaras tú hablando y que situaras, reflexionando sobre dónde estamos en Europa, dónde estamos en Portugal, y que nos des un poco tu visión general.
Alberto, buenos días. En primer lugar, mis disculpas a todos porque yo no hablo castellano. Entiendo bien vuestra lengua, mas como todos los otros portugueses inventamos palabras. Y entonces yo voy a hablar en inglés porque creo que tenéis traducción simultánea y es más exacto y no hay el riesgo de invención de palabras nuevas que los portugueses entienden que poner el acento es suficiente para hablar castellano. No es. Yo tenía una secretaria hace unos años que estaba hablando para España y me decía, no está ninguém. Quería decir, no está nadie. Los portugueses son, como saben, generosos en la invención de la lengua. So thank you very much for your invitation. It's a pleasure to be with all of you here. Thank you, Samantha and Elisa and Alberto. And I bring you some reflections about who we are and where you are. We are in Europe, a continent that is in deep and profound change and movement. And it is not possible to talk about National Health Service without talk about Europe and talk about the reality of demographics in Europe, the aging, the immigration, and all the problems that Europe is now facing, like the war at east in Ukraine with Russia, and also the problems coming now by the conflict in the Middle East. You know, WHO has since the 90s, the end of 90s, a proclamation, an idea that it is important for all the governments to assure the universal coverage. It is important that all the governments assure, in terms of equity, protection of people, universal coverage. But WHO never said that universal coverage should be private, public, or social. It's a national option. If Spain wants to give universal coverage to everybody in a private way of doing that, either financing, either providing, it's a problem of Spain. If the UK wants to maintain the national health system without a strong public position, it's a decision of national government of the UK. So it is important for us, private and public operators, and for political decisors, to have the idea the most important object of our work is people. And people is suffering, people is aging every day. And you know, in my country, we are neighbors with you, and we are a small country in the extreme west of Europe. We are the last of the European countries and the first of the third world countries, as you know. In 2060, from now, 37 years from now, if nothing is done in Portugal, we will be only 8.6 million inhabitants. And more than 35% of people will have more than 60 years. We will not be a sustainable country, nor a sustainable economy. Probably the good idea would be to have a federation in Europe and to make an agreement with Spain and to have an Iberian federation. Because the problem of sustainability has everything to do with age, with demographic transition. And you know, Europe is not dealing the right movement, because we have now in the European Commission and all the European strategy, we have the energy transition, we have the digital transition, but nobody talks about the demographic transition. And people with more than 60 years have, in average, more than 3 or 4 diagnostics. They have comorbidity. They are too expensive. And as you know, probably, the most expensive patients are not the patients with 80 or 90 years, because these people are the resilients. The most expensive patients are people between 60 and 75. So it is necessary to mutualize, to have a very broad way of collecting taxes or funds. You can choose that. In the UK, in Portugal, in Spain, the collecting of taxes is the main source to finance the national health systems, because it is not possible to equalize and to reduce inequalities if you have small amounts of people. If you have a budget or an health insurance, for instance, with 100,000 people subscribing this health plan, my dear friends, it will be not sustainable. And forget every ideas to have plans, private or public, with less than 1 million. I am a professor of public health and health policies, and I study and I teach epidemiology and statistics, and now we deal a lot with numbers. And the ideal system in Europe will be an European health system. It will be really a very good idea. But you know, the treaties are quite clear, considering that the health policies are national competencies. And the first window that we opened in 2020-21 was by the moment of pandemics, when the European Commission, in state of alert, opened cooperation to buy together vaccines to all the people in Europe. And now, at the end of last year, the European Commission created a new structure for health public responses, immediate responses. And when I was in the government, I created with some colleagues, even with my former colleague of Spain, Dolores Montserrat. She was the minister of Spain at this time, and with the colleagues from the Netherlands, Ireland, and Italy, we created the Grupo of La Valletta in order to purchase and to do some procurement in medicines, mainly the medicines to rare disease, because they are too expensive, it's too difficult to buy from small countries. So the first recommendation, the first reflection I would like to share with you is it is necessary to have a very big mutual base of people. Number one. Number two, it is necessary to raise funds. And you can raise funds basically for 3 ways. by fiscal means. This is the case of Portugal, UK, and Spain. I have some friends in Europe that told me that the Portuguese and the Spanish health systems are bad photocopies of the UK health system. I don't know if it is true, but really we were inspired in your model. So the second possibility to raise funds is the mutualizing process, the health insurance, the health plans. You know, in Spain, in Portugal, we have lots of these exercises. And finally, the direct payments. The direct payments by people. Unfortunately, in my country, we have 32% of direct payments after taxes. This is not acceptable. In Sweden, as you know, probably is one of the richest countries in Europe with a national health system. The direct payments are below 8%. So when you have direct payments, you have inequalities because people are pay in a double way. They pay by taxes and they pay when they go to the pharmacy and don't have the 100% reimbursement of the medicines, and they have to pay a part of that. So the other conclusion, the other reflection I would like to share with you is how would be the health systems in Europe in 10 years? In 10 years, Europe will be elder than is today. Portugal is the second oldest country in Europe after Italy. Italy is the first now. And as you know, probably the oldest country in the world is Japan, because in Japan people does not die. They don't die. They are eternal. They live for 100, 120, 130. They are eternal. But the problem of the demographic changing will raise this question, political question. It will be possible to supply every protection, health protection, every care, every medicines with public funds only? And with only public institutions, hospitals and health centers? Or it will be acceptable, and more than acceptable, desirable, that we have a mixture, a combination, a virtuous combination between public and private. And that is the central idea of this table. I would like not to take much more time, but I would like to conclude with that. What is really the challenge for European countries? I exclude that from the challenge to the UK because they leave us, as you know. They quit from us and now they are independent again. But in the continental Europe, we will have not conditions in financial sustainable consideration to support all the protection. And so we will have to find some combined models of financing, either by fiscal means, either by other plans, health insurance or social insurance, like you have in the Netherlands, for instance, or in Germany. And the most important role for public-private cooperation will be, from my point of view, in the providing of healthcare. We must have comparison, you must have competition for the best practices in terms of providing healthcare and health management. I don't mind, as a responsible of the government, as an official, to pay to La Ribera and to pay to a public hospital in Portugal. I want to have some results, efficient results, and quality and safety of care. So it is clear all over Europe, in Italy, in France, in the UK, less, but in Spain and Portugal, that in the next 10 years we'll have an increase of the participation of private actors in the providing of healthcare and also in the financing, collecting of funds. And finally, the most important cooperation will be that we saw in the previous presentation. The support services and all the services like innovation, like digital transformation, like the presentation that we saw, quite interesting in the UK, about the contamination operations. And that will be, surely, in my idea, will be made with more efficient processes and with less cost to all the taxpayers. So, in conclusion, we have a problem, like the American says some times ago, hello, hello, Houston, we have a problem because we are getting older. We have innovation with prices that are not affordable for small and medium and poor countries in Europe, even for the big countries like Germany. We have a problem of cost because innovation is not controlled by states. It depends only on the pharmaceutical companies, big pharma. And the average cost by patient is rising every year. And when I finished my medical course in Portugal some years ago, the average age in the hospital of Santa Maria in Lisbon was 76. Nowadays, 92. Welcome then to a new world where costs are getting higher every day, where ideology does not resolve the problem. It's not a matter of right or left. It's a problem of efficiency, a problem of rights, human rights, and a problem of sustainability, because the European countries cannot have a fiscal effort without limits. In Portugal, in the pandemics, the pre-pandemics period, we had a budget, a national budget of 9 billion for the NHS in Portugal. And now we are getting rapidly to 16 billion. Practically, we doubled the budget in 5 years. This is not sustainable, this is not possible, because we know that recession and economical crisis will arrive. And if you go to the historical series and to the film of the economy, I assure you that every 10 years you have a recession in Europe. Every 10 years. Since the first oil shock in the war of the Yom Kippur in Israel, in 73, 83, 93, 2003, 2013, and now you are expecting the arriving next year of the recession in Europe. So, I apologize for being so extensive, but I believe that the state has to maintain a strategic and an important and crucial role to regulating all the rights for all people, poor and rich people. But the state in every country in Europe will need strategically from the cooperation, not the supplying, only the supplying of services, the cooperation, strategical cooperation, and establishing as the former panel show with the colleague told about, partnership with 15 years. I think I understood 15 years. Yes, medium and long-term partnerships, because in 2 years you don't have any advantage for state. If you have an agreement with the private for 2 years, you will not earn anything. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Si quieres, Elisa, puedes hacer también una valoración o darnos tu opinión sobre la situación que estamos viviendo en España desde tu perspectiva.
Bueno, gracias Alberto, gracias Adalberto. Sí que es verdad que Adalberto ha hecho una visión global que podría servir para cada uno de los 3 países aquí representados en este panel. La situación y los retos son globales, pero es verdad que en España tenemos además unas circunstancias que son distintas probablemente a Portugal o al Reino Unido. Aquí tenemos 17 comunidades autónomas distintas, hay fragmentación del sistema sanitario de forma acusada, cada sistema tiene unas políticas distintas, aunque haya un sistema nacional de salud. Y la situación en la que nos encontramos ahora es que tenemos las peores listas de espera de la historia. Tenemos un envejecimiento, como tú has comentado, Adalberto, cada vez más progresivo, lo que va a dar lugar más a la cronicidad, un envejecimiento mayor, más complejidad, nuevas enfermedades que van apareciendo, la salud mental que ha emergido y se le da importancia ahora porque ha aumentado muchísimo, especialmente tras el COVID. Y hay un problema también que lo vimos mucho en el COVID, que es la soledad de las personas mayores. Y eso es un factor muy importante de envejecimiento y eso luego lo ligaré con otra reflexión. Por lo tanto, los retos de que los costes van incrementando y de que haya ausencia de profesionales que nos afecta a todo el mundo, pues aquí en España también está pasando. Entonces, creo que es momento que con las nuevas tecnologías los gobernantes, las personas que gestionan nuestros impuestos, los que hacen los presupuestos, tienen que ser valientes, tienen que tomar decisiones, como ha dicho Alberto, tienen que estar abiertos al cambio. Y eso, para estar abiertos al cambio, tienen que estar dispuestos a hacer cosas distintas a las que se han estado haciendo ahora. Ahora tenemos un reto importante que es la incorporación de nuevas tecnologías, inteligencia artificial, que ha dicho Alberto. Tenemos que hacer que esa medicina, que esa forma de hacer las cosas, que tiene que ser necesariamente de forma distinta, no vamos a tener más profesionales que los que tenemos, por lo tanto tendremos que tener claro que lo que queremos es mejorar la salud de la población, pero tendremos que abordarlo de otro modo. Lo tendremos que abordar con una atención híbrida de profesionales en presencia, de profesionales en telemedicina, incorporar nuevas tecnologías, incorporar la inteligencia artificial para que nos ayude a atender mejor a esas personas. Tendremos que hablar de una atención colaborativa, por lo tanto tendremos que colaborar y trabajar, y luego tendré la oportunidad de explicar la importancia de la integración asistencial, de evitar la fragmentación del sistema, pero no solamente en la parte sanitaria, sino también en la parte sociosanitaria, en la parte social, en lo que importa a la comunidad también, a los ayuntamientos, a las asociaciones de pacientes y también entre el sector público y privado, porque ya lo hemos demostrado durante muchos años y especialmente después de la mayor crisis sanitaria que hemos vivido en este siglo. Por lo tanto, es tiempo de hacer algo distinto a nivel híbrido, a nivel colaborativo, y también es muy importante que seamos capaces de hacer y aportar un modelo de valor, una medicina de valor. Por lo tanto, que esté centrada en el paciente, que sea proactiva, que sea preventiva, predictiva, que esté participada por el propio paciente porque él está implicado en su propia salud y en sus resultados de salud. Y que además sea poblacional, que tengamos una visión de toda la población, pero que seamos capaces de hacer para cada persona de forma individualizada un plan de salud. Por lo tanto, creo que hay muchas cosas que deberíamos de hacer, que tenemos que cambiar el chip porque estamos en la peor situación y si no se hace nada, la situación empeorará. Es una certeza que eso va a pasar.
Gracias, Elisa. Samantha, me gustaría que nos dieras tu visión sobre la situación, tu punto de vista sobre la situación en el Reino Unido, o donde tú quieras también.
I was smiling because you were speaking in Spanish to me.
Yes, it's true. It's true.
It's true. I was fixated on what Elisa was saying, so thank you. My name is Sam. I'm from the UK, and I'm incredibly proud to come from the UK, and I'm even more proud of our healthcare system, despite its challenges, which I will talk through this morning, but also in an attempt to, I think we have lunch after this, in an attempt to take us to a positive mindset before lunch, give some examples of where we see some innovation happening and some extraordinary partnerships. So the NHS is, as you will, I'm sure, know, a predominantly publicly funded through taxation system. It is free at the point of delivery, and this is in our DNA. It is who we are. I cannot see in my lifetime that will change. It would be a very brave politician that would tackle that, but from a personal perspective, this is something that we feel so very strongly about, that access and equality for people being able to access the healthcare system is fundamentally who we are. We spend about 12% of our GDP on healthcare, so we spend a lot of money on our healthcare system. And we employ about 1.2 million people, workforce within the NHS, and then also within social care alongside that. We have about 125,000 vacancies within the United Kingdom, of which probably about 7% of those vacancies are medical staffing vacancies. So in common with other countries, we have long-term workforce shortages. We have an aging population like everybody else, and we have over 60 million people, over 60 million people within the UK, of which significantly elderly population, and the challenges that brings. But also, we also have about 7.75 million people waiting and going through their pathway for elective surgery. So at the moment, the national standard is with being seen referral to treatment within 18 weeks. We haven't met that for some time. Some of it as a result of the pandemic, but also rising beforehand. So about 7.7 million people waiting, of which probably 2/3 of those individuals don't actually need surgery. They are waiting for outpatients, they are waiting for diagnostic procedures to determine what will happen to them, and which is, of course, where there are significant opportunities for partnerships, which I will come back to. In about November last year, the estimate was around a £10 billion backlog maintenance for our estate, to get our estate, our hospitals, our GP surgeries up to the standards that they should be, is around about 10 billion. That's even before any future investment. So, and just if I give you an example, the thing that occupies the waking moment of every politician within the UK is access to general practice. When I previously worked for the Prime Minister, it was the thing that they had most communication and correspondence about from local people. We see about 44% of our patients on the day of request to see a general practitioner. So 44% of people get seen within a day, and then about 12% between 2 and 4 weeks. Some of that is at the request of the patient. So we have some, in the beautiful understatement, we have some access challenges within the UK. We have a rising population, we have an ageing population, and we have a future population, and I'll talk a bit more about my children in a bit in terms of their views, but we also have a change in expectation and a change in societal demands for healthcare in the future. Having said all of that, we are, and I go back to what I said at the beginning, inordinately proud of our healthcare system, and people like me and many, many, many others remain committed to doing what we can to improve the offer for people that use our services. So where are there opportunities for partnerships, and where do those partnerships happen at the moment? Despite the gloomy picture I may just have painted for you, innovation in the UK is thriving. Innovation within healthcare is thriving. Wherever, whether it came out of the pandemic or wherever there are challenges, wherever you look across the system, there are innovations happening, usually but not exclusively, started by a clinician who has an idea about how to make things better, or an engineer who looks at our supply chain. But there are so many examples. So, for example, in the care of the elderly, we have companies who are using AI to detect falls or predict when falls may occur, and then wrap clinical services and support services around that individual. We know that in primary care, about 30% of a GP's time is at the moment spent on things that don't need a GP. For example, checking results, making sure that repeat prescriptions, sick notes, and a lot of that can be automated and can be innovated, making sure that the people are very expensive, very highly specialised workforce, do the things that only they can do. And where that happens, we know there is an improvement in the outcomes for the individuals who use our services. And we have examples of that around proper population health management in terms of the care of people from a cardiology perspective or with high blood pressure, looking very more practically about things that are supporting our very scarce workforce to choose their rotas, make sure that they are able to do the things that make a difference for them personally. But these are all innovations that are just in examples that would not happen if there wasn't collaboration and if there wasn't partnership. But I can reassure you, despite the challenges that we have, there is a significant amount and still an awful lot more to do. It is unquestionably the case that we are capital constrained within the UK, and where there are I couldn't agree more in terms of long-term relationships and making sure that those long-term contracts. For example, it was reported the other day that we spend about £1.3 billion on storing patient records when we could have EPRs. So about 80% of our providers have electronic patient records, but we shouldn't be storing patient records in warehouses and spending that amount of money. So the opportunity for the capital investment and the managing the risk with that together, and using the examples that Ribera Salud have been able to demonstrate so very successfully. The tech partnerships that we know are happening and will happen even further, whether it's remote monitoring, whether it's, go back to what I said about outpatients, taking those people who are waiting for outpatient procedures or diagnostics and seeing them virtually, and using AI to support their diagnosis, and making sure that they get to the place that they need as quickly as possible, which does not replace the clinician, but enables the clinician to work as much as they can. I was struck earlier by listening to the presentation on decontamination, and I was smiling wryly because I do have scars on my back from when I'm running a hospital as a hospital chief executive, when our decontamination services weren't as they should be. But none of this happens without partnership. None of this happens without collaboration. And the United Kingdom has moved to what we call integrated care systems, which is based on collaboration of hospitals, general practice, social care, and those perhaps non-obvious health institutions, local government working together around a local population, which is where we think that we have opportunities to truly shift towards a more preventative model, and the holy grail for all of us in terms of only going into hospital when you really need to go into hospital. And then just briefly, because I'm conscious of the time, the point that I made around the generational shift, I said to my children, I'm going. Once I said to them I'm going to Spain, and they said, well, why on earth would anybody want to listen to you talking? Once we'd got past that, I said, what should I talk about? And they said, ChatGPT it. So I did. And the use of AI and the use of tools like that for people, it's not about embracing it, it is unleashed. We are the older generation, and it is for us to enable those systems to be used appropriately, of course, with the right regulation, but the generation coming through, this is normal for them, and the use of remote wearables, making sure that we use all of those things that are available now. AI in our finance systems, AI in our payment systems, to ensure that we are becoming more efficient, that we are becoming more productive, and that we are enabling our scarce workforce to focus on the things that they need to be able to focus on, and not forgetting that this is now a consumer-driven, unleashed requirement for healthcare of the future.
Thank you, Samantha. Se han puesto encima de la mesa muchas cosas. Una similitud, aunque ya se ha hablado, pero me gustaría que habláramos más, una similitud entre los tres países en cuanto a la gestión del Sistema Nacional de Salud en los últimos tiempos ha sido la movilización de los profesionales sanitarios. Ha habido huelgas y paros en los tres países, en España a principios de año, en Portugal, en el Reino Unido, buscando pues, mejoras salariales, mejoras sociales de todo tipo. Yo soy de los que piensan que el mayor activo que tiene el sistema sanitario público y privado es nuestros profesionales. Estamos sufriendo una falta de profesionales en nuestros países. Somos conscientes que para esta transformación del sistema que estamos planteando aquí, que es importantísima realizar en la próxima década, el rol de los profesionales es esencial, y me gustaría saber qué opináis al respecto, qué opináis, qué es lo que se debería hacer tanto desde el sector público, desde el sector privado, para conseguir que el profesional sanitario sea el que movilice y haga avanzar el sistema sanitario hacia donde creemos que tiene que ir. Alberto, si quieres.
I was listening to Sarah, and I am quite fear and enthusiastic with digital transition, AI, and I believe really that that will be a great opportunity to change not only the health administration but all the health, all the areas of the public activities, because we are now living a very surprising and astonishing revolution, digital revolution. But I remember that I was in an European Council in 2017, and I participated in a discussion about the lack of doctors in Europe. And we estimate that that time that Europe was lacking, the European Union, 250,000 to 250 million doctors less. And the discussion was, I don't know if you know the sitting on the European Council, the countries are seated always in the same place because as to have with the history of the creation of the European Commission, and Portugal is seated with Germany in its left side and France in the right side. And our colleague from Poland was quite concerned about the fact that Poland formed lots of good doctors, and at the very last day of this course they went to Germany. And my colleague for German turned to me in the European Council and told me in a very slow sound of voice, what part of the European treaties did it not understood? Because the free circulation of people and professionals in Europe. So we have a problem with doctors. We have a problem with skill mix, because in Portugal, for instance, and I believe in Spain is the same, there is a stronger resistance against skill mix and the sharing of competencies. Doctors don't want to lose some privileges, professional privileges, to other professions. And we have a rising number of the needs. There is a misalignment between the needs of people, the unmet needs don't stop every day. We have more unmet needs. And the risk is that in the UK, there are two big loves. People of UK have, in my point of view, two grand loves. The Queen Elizabeth and the NHS. And they are strongly attached to the NHS. But you have 17 million people waiting for care. In Portugal, we have, with much more or less population, we have 250,000 people waiting for care. And this is not fair. This is not equitable. So our governments must respond to every people that, as in a moment, needs to be satisfied. And in that case, if it is need to ask the cooperation of private or social sector, we should do that. Because we have the obligation of provide care to every citizen in the best conditions in the right time. It is not right to impose the system against the interest of people. So this is the reason why I believe the cooperation between sectors will, in a flexible way, when we in the public system can respond to every need, we don't probably we don't need to ask the other sectors to supply these results. And finally, a word about Elisa said one thing that is quite important: the fragmentation versus the integration. All the systems in Europe are fragmented. All. And I recommend everybody in this room to read the last report, or Health at Glance, from the OECD, the Organização Económica OCDE, and to read with attention all the tables, and to respond to these questions. What is the country in Europe that is more efficient between the balance between the resources and the results? I mean, you are people from business, you are managers, you are people with the economic and financial knowledge, and you know that the resources must be transformed in results. And the good news, when you look to the Health at Glance, the last report, and you are looking for the countries with the best results in health, and the most efficient ratio between resources and health, do you know where are these countries? First of all, they are countries with national health systems. They are rich countries, and they are all in the north of Europe. And the final question is this: we don't resolve the problems, the health problems of people, without raising salaries, without giving education, without giving housing in good conditions, without interfering positively in the social determinants. And Sweden is the highlight in Europe because they are educated, they have good schools, they have good nutrition, and they have good education. And this makes every difference, total difference in the health results. We can have a very interesting and modern health system if you don't have the social determinants controlled. And we have problems with immigration in the UK, in Portugal, and Spain. And please read the Health at Glance, the last report of EOCD, and analyze results and resources, to avoid the problem that we are now living in Portugal, that you put money, open the problems, and the results stay stable, they don't improve, and every year we have more money, open our difficulties. This is quite a problem that we are now facing in Portugal. In 2018, the Portuguese health system was the most efficient in Europe, and now is one of the most inefficient health systems in Europe.
Elisa?
Sí, bueno, yo creo que la escasez de profesionales habría una medida que sería lo práctico, que sería incrementar el número de profesionales que tengan acceso a la universidad y acceso a la formación especializada, y eso es lo más fácil. Y luego estoy convencida, y lo creo, y como médico lo puedo decir, que sin el profesional no se puede abordar ningún cambio, ninguna transformación en un sistema sanitario. Por lo tanto, si antes hablábamos de medicina híbrida, de medicina colaborativa y de medicina de valor, tenemos que tener en cuenta que el profesional es el mayor activo, como has dicho tú también, Alberto, y es clave en esa transformación del sistema. Lo que haga el profesional lo hará el paciente, lo hará el ciudadano y lo hará el cuidador, porque el profesional es el líder natural del sistema sanitario. Eso se ha demostrado, como hemos dicho antes, en la pandemia. O sea, en la pandemia todas las organizaciones, o al menos Ribera, lo primero que tenía claro era proteger al profesional, porque el profesional era el que tenía que cuidar de las personas, y lo hicimos. Pero el profesional tomó el liderazgo de este reto, de este drama, y ellos se organizaron, y un cirujano era capaz de pasar visita en urgencias y un oftalmólogo de ayudar en la UCI y de una enfermera o de una matrona pasar hospitalización. O sea, entre los profesionales se organizaron, se identificaron, se apoyaron, se formaron para prestar un servicio, que era atender a sus pacientes. Por lo tanto, yo creo que ese es un tema muy importante que tenemos que tener en cuenta del liderazgo de los profesionales. Por lo tanto, basándome en este ejemplo, que ha sido un ejemplo que todos lo hemos visto en todo el mundo, ellos son los que tienen que hacer posible, somos los que tenemos que hacer posible el cambio y la transformación del sistema sanitario para centrarlo en la salud de las personas, que es lo más importante, y aplicar modelos de predicción, de prevención, de proacción, etc. ¿Qué drivers pueden mover, digamos, a los profesionales? En primer lugar, y sin ninguna duda, el driver que nos mueve a los profesionales es mejorar la atención a los pacientes, sin ninguna duda. Otro driver que nos mueve es el reconocimiento profesional, que se nos reconozca, tanto por parte de las organizaciones sanitarias, por parte de los políticos, las organizaciones públicas, privadas, etc. Por lo tanto, y el reconocimiento por parte de la sociedad. Por lo tanto, hay que reconocer y prestigiar al profesional que está en primera línea de batalla. Y luego, por supuesto, es un must, es obligado que los profesionales tengan formación, tengan investigación, tengan docencia, porque eso es un añadido que todo profesional quiere tener en cuenta. Y luego es muy importante que el profesional participe en la toma de las decisiones, que participe en la estrategia, que participe en plantear qué objetivos, cómo vamos a medir esos objetivos, cómo hacemos benchmarking de esos objetivos y qué resultados obtenemos para poder, digamos, mejorar lo que estamos haciendo todos los días. Por lo tanto, tiene que participar a nivel político, a nivel gubernamental, tiene que participar en los consejos de administración, que es donde se establecen las prioridades. Y al final sí que hablamos que, si hablamos de temas sanitarios, pues los profesionales sanitarios algo sabemos para tomar decisiones que sean lo mejor para la ciudadanía. ¿Qué puedo decir de nuestra experiencia? Bueno, nuestra experiencia durante estos 25 años, lo que hemos hecho siempre ha sido alinear los objetivos de la organización, del gobierno y de los profesionales. Es más, yo tengo los mismos objetivos que tienen un médico o una enfermera, que es mejorar la calidad asistencial. Parte de mis objetivos son esos. Luego hemos garantizado que el más lo tengan, formación, docencia, investigación, y pusimos ya hace muchos años, hace más de 20 años, un sistema de retribución flexible que era variable, que no solamente se premiaba la actividad, sino que se premiaba la actividad y la calidad, perdón. Por lo tanto, era una combinación para distinguir y para que ellos se midieran y hubiera una competición y una mejora continua entre ellos con total transparencia. Y luego, en los últimos años, lo que estamos incorporando es, además de un sistema retributivo y todo lo que he comentado, pues un sistema más flexible. Porque al final las necesidades de las personas, de los pacientes han cambiado, pero las necesidades de los profesionales también han cambiado. Entonces tenemos que ser capaces de adaptarnos a esas necesidades, ser más flexibles. Si hablamos de medicina personalizada, pues vamos a tener que hablar de voy a personalizar la atención que cada profesional necesita para prestar lo mejor de sí mismo. Y desde luego a lo mejor tendremos que profundizar más en qué fórmulas pues hacemos a los profesionales partícipes para que ellos sean más parte y más implicada en el sistema, en la organización en la que trabajan, porque de esa manera van a estar más alineados, más comprometidos, en primer lugar, para mejorar la calidad asistencial, que ellos son los artífices y los que la van a prestar, y sobre todo para garantizar la sostenibilidad del sistema sanitario. Como Samantha hablaba antes de sus gemelos, yo también me gusta hablar de mi madre, que tiene 92 años y que ha tenido un sistema sanitario sostenible. Mi madre se llama Elisa, como yo, y mi hija tiene 17 años, que también se llama Elisa, y a mí me gustaría que ella tuviera un sistema de salud sostenible en el tiempo. Por lo tanto, creo que todos tenemos que estar comprometidos, los gobernantes, nosotros y los profesionales. Por lo tanto, creo que tenemos que cambiar la forma en la que estamos abordando todas estas cuestiones, y es tiempo de cambio.
Samantha, your idea about the role of the professionals in the transformation of the sector?
Thank you. Just very briefly, recruit the right type of profession. Look for what we need now to what we're going to need in the future. Make it attractive. When I go around schools, I'm not sure I see. I don't know, in different countries, sometimes when we go around schools, they have open days for children thinking about what they're going to do in the future. I don't see many offering to come and work in healthcare. I don't regret it for a second. I think it's the best thing to do, but make it attractive for people. If we need more primary care physicians, make sure we have freedom of movement to train more primary care physicians. And then, very obviously, when they are with us, treat them well. We have a lot of learning about this within the UK in terms of if people want to choose their own shifts. Car parking, I cannot tell you how much of a debate car parking and the payment of car parking is within the UK in terms of professionals. I mean, of all health professionals. Treat them well, make them feel valued, ensure that they have a voice. I could not agree with what Elisa said more. At all levels of decision making do we need professionals because they are the people who are there on a daily basis, and they are the people who understand the things that we need to do. Just really, really, really small personal example from some years ago, but in 1999 I remember putting in probably quite a novel EPR system in the hospital that I was working in, and it was amazing. It was so shiny. It was wonderful. And I remember my nursing staff a nurse saying to me, "That's great, but I just don't know how to use this." We had given no thought to the people who were going to use it on a daily basis. They hadn't been involved. And then, of course, the reaction was something that was not in terms of being included and being part of it. So being part of the decision-making, treating people well. I'm struck by, for example, the team at Ribera. You've been together for about 20, 25 years. That shows a level of trust and respect and growth together that we could significantly learn from. And then my only final point, which might be slightly more of a challenge, which is I absolutely agree about the role of the professional, but not at the detriment of the role of the patient or the user themselves, because that is where I think we have slight danger, and it needs to be a partnership.
Muy bien. Ahora os voy a hacer preguntas, pero ya os voy a pedir brevedad en la respuesta por el tiempo y porque me gustaría que la gente también tuviera, el público tuviera la oportunidad de hacer alguna pregunta. Otra singularidad que tienen los tres sistemas es la fragmentación del sistema. Adalberto lo ha dicho, tenemos el hospital, la primaria, el domicilio, los servicios sociales, todo separado. Yo creo que eso es tremendamente ineficiente si lo vemos desde la perspectiva de la gestión, pero al mismo tiempo es dar un peor servicio a nuestros ciudadanos. Ahora en Portugal se está planteando una transformación del sistema. En el Reino Unido la atención primaria está en manos de médicos independientes. En España han habido pocas experiencias, una de ellas, la que hizo Ribera Salud, de integración. ¿Cómo veis vosotros el futuro del sistema? ¿Va a ir hacia modelos más integrados, modelos de gestión poblacional, modelos predictivos?
Nosotros, eu tinha uma grande vontade de falar espanhol, mas é muito perigoso. Now in Portugal, and we invite all of you to look to Portugal, to this precise moment, because we are now starting the most important reform in the last 30 years. And politics is quite a difficult exercise. The reform that is now being implemented was written by me in the government program in 2015. And the present CEO of the NHS, the Portuguese NHS, was my former Secretary of State. So we need approximately 8 years to go from the program that we wrote in 2015 to the implementation. And we are now going to implement from 1st of January of 2024 39 Riberas in Portugal. 39 Riberas. We are now creating the local health units that comprises in an integration mode primary care, social care, hospital care, and long-term care. This is quite a challenge. And it is important for you to help us because you have a huge experience here in Spain. And Ribera is a very good example and is a source of inspiration. And now we'll have 39 local health units with different dimensions. Some of them are little, some of them are too big. In Lisbon, we have local health units with 1.2 billion euros of budget. And the idea is to have integration by opposition of fragmentation with digital tools, with health information system integrated, and putting finally the citizen in the center of the system.
And a capitative model.
A capitative model with adjustment by risk.
Yes.
With adjustment by this is quite. It was written. I will have the pleasure to send you the government program of 2015. Was written by me and by another colleague, and Fernando Araújo, the CEO, who was my former Secretary of State, is implementing it. A capitation with adjustment by risk, with integration of all services, and enabling these local health units to have some collaborative cooperation with private and social sector. So this is quite interesting to be observed by all Europe, because if you have some success or some good results, that will be an interesting movement that replicates your experience and can give some ideas to other countries less integrated. This is not the case of the UK. The UK is quite well integrated, but we have in some other countries in Europe, like France and probably Italy and Greece, they are not so well integrated. And the integration is very bad because of 2 points. The excess of expenditure. You spend much more money if you have a system fragmented. And for the service of people, because we have the old people in Portugal with a plastic bag going to the health center and doing 2 kilometers to go to the hospital to make an appointment. And hospitals does not talk with health centers. And the messenger, the link between hospitals and health centers are old people. And now, finally, the last information important is a fight from me and from Fernando Araújo was to include in the national health system the network of community pharmacies. And pharmacies now are delivering vaccines to people with more than 60 years. They are making the renovation of chronic medication. And they are, in the 2024, they are also being included in the triage process of people. They are connected to the National Health 24 NHS Health hotline to reduce the inadequate usage of hospital urgencies. So we are hoping that that could go in a very good movement, but your experience is a hotspot. It's quite important. Was inspiring in this model, and also the long experience that the UK has in integration of healthcare to cut some bureaucratic problems, because the system is strongly bureaucratic, with small powers, with little powers, with alcaides in the health power of the health system. So we hope that will go quite well in 2024 and 25.
Elisa, tienes 3 minutos.
3 minutos. Bueno, Adalberto, gracias por introducirme, porque sí que es verdad que hacer una integración asistencial tiene distintos retos. Nosotros lo hicimos hace 20 años y aprendimos de aquello y seguimos aprendiendo todos los días. Sí que es verdad que es la forma de hacer esa medicina colaborativa, y los retos, lo primeros a vencer son las resistencias del gobierno. Por lo tanto, un gobierno tiene que ser valiente, como ha sido en este momento el gobierno portugués, de decir: voy a hacer una financiación capitativa y voy a impulsar que haya una integración asistencial, porque lo que quiero financiar es la salud, no hacer más actividad y más fragmentación. Por lo tanto, ese es un reto importante. Otro reto a vencer son las resistencias entre los equipos directivos, porque el equipo directivo va a pensar que va a perder poder, el que gestiona el hospital, el que gestiona atención primaria. Entonces, hay que diseñar bien las estructuras organizativas para que tengan esa visión corporativa de que lo que importa es el ciudadano, lo que importa es la salud del ciudadano, y nosotros podríamos estar en ese centro. Por lo tanto, hay que alinear bien esos objetivos y definir bien la estructura. Otras resistencias que hay en el mundo es la resistencia de los profesionales. Por eso tenemos que tener una cultura corporativa bien definida para que ayude a la transformación cultural de los profesionales que trabajan en el hospital y que trabajan en atención primaria, para que no vean competición entre ellos y para que sumen y ganen ambos. Yo recuerdo algunos, pero luego los podré contar, algunas anécdotas. Por lo tanto, es importante vencer esas resistencias, saber que las vamos a tener para evitarlas, ¿no? Y luego, a nivel profesional, hay que definir bien los procesos asistenciales para saber cuál es el rol de cada uno, porque lo que importa es el ciudadano, el paciente y el que cuida a ese paciente. Esa cultura corporativa la tenemos que tener desde arriba hasta abajo. Nosotros diseñamos, voy a ser muy breve, el triángulo del éxito, que era, para hacer esto necesitábamos 3 elementos, que eran los sistemas de información, que fueran ágiles, que sean útiles para los pacientes, para el ciudadano, para los gestores y para los profesionales. Porque con este sistema de información los profesionales podían medirse a sí mismos, compararse con ellos y mejorar de forma continua, porque es el profesional que hemos dicho antes, el que va a hacer la gestión clínica, el que va a hacer lo correcto en el mejor lugar terapéutico para el paciente. Con todo esto podemos transformar o ayudar a transformar ese sistema y además nosotros tenemos resultados después de años. Esos resultados son en que a nivel organizativo bajaron las urgencias en el hospital porque se repartieron más en atención primaria o en el hospital, disminuyeron las estancias en el hospital porque había una buena relación entre hospital y primaria, disminuyeron los reingresos, aumentaron los ingresos en hospitalización a domicilio, que es un entorno que hay que potenciar, que es el domicilio, porque el paciente donde está muchas veces es en ese domicilio. Por lo tanto, mejoras en resultados de salud, hipertensión, dislipemia, etcétera, están demostradas y están al servicio de todos ustedes. Y acabo, Alberto.
Sam, 3 minutes.
30 seconds.
This is the efficiencies of the UK system. They are quite efficient.
I say I'll do 30 seconds and then I'll do 10 minutes. But integration, our integrated care systems have been around for 2 years by law, but longer in practice. It is all about collaboration. It is ensuring that you have the right people who are both delivering healthcare and also who can prevent sickness working together. But the learning that we have is that you have to have clarity of accountability, clarity of responsibility, and a focus on outcomes as opposed to institution.
Okay, thank you very much. La verdad es que se me han quedado muchas preguntas por hacer. El paciente, qué es lo que el paciente requiere de nuestras organizaciones públicas y privadas, relacionado con lo que había dicho en la introducción, de que en un sistema nacional de salud equitativo, como es el español, hay un 25% de población que decide sacarse una póliza de seguros. ¿Por qué? Quería preguntaros por la transformación digital, pero ya también se ha hablado. Quería preguntaros, en fin, muchas preguntas, pero quedan 5 minutos y si hay alguien entre el público que quiere hacer una pregunta a la mesa, pues es el momento, y si no, pues seguiré haciendo. Pues aquí alguien ha levantado rápidamente. Alguien que me parece que es Mariano Guerrero. Bueno, te veo.
Muchísimas gracias. La verdad que interesante. No les voy a preguntar a Alberto de Rosa ni a Elisa porque tengo muchas oportunidades de preguntarles personalmente. Pero sí que me ha llamado mucho la atención que estemos hablando continuamente de pacientes, todo el mundo. Ya no hablamos de información ni de comunicación, tampoco hablamos de experiencia, pero ¿cómo están midiendo en el Reino Unido todo el tema? Porque leo que están midiendo todo lo que es la experiencia paciente, que sería un poco el reto del futuro para medir la calidad de los servicios sanitarios. Y parece que está apareciendo una nueva profesión y una profesión que parece que está en manos de la colaboración público-privada también, porque lo están haciendo empresas privadas que están haciendo la experiencia del paciente. Y al señor Araujo, le quiero preguntar al señor ministro, estamos hablando continuamente de dinero. No hay dinero, no hay profesionales, pero ¿por qué no hablamos de que hay un porcentaje altísimo de actividad asistencial que no aporta valor a salud y los movimientos que en este momento hay sobre el hiperdiagnóstico y el hipertratamiento? ¿Se preocupan de eso? Gracias.
Pues 2 minutos cada uno, lo siento.
Thank you. So we measure everything in the United Kingdom, and we are measured for everything in the United Kingdom. So we have a healthcare regulator. We look at outcome as a national regulator, so you can't provide services in the UK if you're not registered with the Care Quality Commission. They come in and they do visits. You are regulated for outcomes. We have a general practice is regulated and is required on outcomes, and patient experience is part of that. The access targets that I described, the waiting list, it was 7.7 rather than 17, although that did, I suspect we might get there, but or 48 hours to see a GP, they are also deemed as patient experience. We also have something that's very interesting, which is, as you would see in other industries, an explosion of consumer experience. So something called I want great care, you can go and you can rate your healthcare professional, you can rate your healthcare team. If you go onto Google, we have the Google experience. People are starting to rate healthcare experiences as well. So we have both the official, the national, the local. Within every contract that we have to demonstrate patient experience, and also probably more consumer. I think we have a significant way to go, though, in terms of ensuring that we truly reflect and truly improve on the patient experience. And certainly as a consumer myself of healthcare, obviously, I think that we could do an awful lot better, particularly in our admin systems, in terms of communication and making of appointments, as well as, of course, outcomes.
Thank you.
You put the question that values $1 million because you know the health systems are complex realities. And we have in all countries in Europe people with overcare and people with undercare. People that realizes lots of exams and diagnoses and consultations and go to every provider in their countries, and people without assistance. This is a drama, a political drama, because that is clearly inequalities of systems. And you are right, because we spend lots of money with medicines, with medical devices, with practice that is not efficient, that does not represent quality. So what should be the best way to do a better provision of care in Europe? First of all, is to have a culture of gold standard, benchmark. And I insist for you to read this report of the OECD, because you can rapidly understand what are the best countries in some terms, in certain aspects and in other fields. And probably will be lead to a conclusion that the ideal health system in Europe will be a mixture of 30% NHS, the social idea, the Beveridge report of 48. This is gold standard in terms of ideological idea, to protect without any payment at the moment of the need. This is, it's not socialist, it's not social democratic, it's not liberal. This is I should say, this is a good idea, a social idea for people. Then the patient experience or the citizen, I prefer the citizen experience. There are lots of people without patient that go to health system. Probably the Netherlands, probably German. And you can have 20-30% of this compound with a little bit of the Netherlands, a little bit of Germany. Also, the freedom of choice of France. And finally, the good experience of collaboration between sectors from Portugal, Spain, and Italy. And with that mixture, we could build in Europe the best of the health systems, but it is naturally important that private sector could help governments to analyze and to evaluate. Because value, and not only value for money, but value-based healthcare, it is now a reality. You should state publicly to your citizens that if you are giving care in excess to Sarah, probably you are avoiding to give the right care to Alberto. And this is a public responsibility, and the evaluation made by academy, by universities, and by private companies that have these skills to evaluate the performance of health systems will be welcome. And finally, I have a dream. I must confess you, I am a federalist. I would like to see in my time of life the European as a federation, Europe as a federation. But probably that will not possible. But I have the hope that it is still possible to have more cooperation in treaties, in the next revision of treaties, to put inside the treaties more cooperation in healthcare. Because this separation of national realities is generating now in Europe different realities, and probably all of you know quite well Hungary, Austria, other countries, France, Belgium, and we have different realities. That is not an idea that from Europe that I have. I regret a lot that Sarah left us, but I hope that in a few years she will be coming to join us again in Europe, the great Europe, with a great collaboration and global vision of health delivering to all the cities and health protection for all the cities. But you are totally right. We spent lots of money in medicines that are not useful. We have repetition of exams, repetition of procedures, and this is a problem in Portugal, in Spain, I don't know, even in the UK also we have the same problem.
Bueno, una pregunta, pero una. Ya estamos fuera de tiempo, entonces.
Now in football, in the European Championship, all the referees give more than 10 minutes.
Bueno, okay.
Bueno, muchas gracias. Gracias por sus intervenciones, por venir desde fuera a contarnos sus experiencias. Gracias, Alberto, por promover esta mesa. Desde el Círculo de Sanidad, del que soy miembro, le damos las gracias, ¿no? Yo quería hablar de la profesionalización de la gestión sanitaria. En España estamos viendo cómo cada vez que cambia un gobierno de una comunidad autónoma, automáticamente a los gestores sanitarios los cambian. Hay una entidad aquí, que es el SEDISA, la Sociedad de Directivos de la Salud, que lleva años trabajando en que los gestores sanitarios sean profesionales, tengan una formación específica para gestionar un hospital, que en la mayoría de los casos un hospital es la empresa más importante de la comunidad autónoma. Esto no se está produciendo. Aquí, insisto, cada vez que hay un cambio, quitan a todos los gerentes y en algunos casos incluso ponen a políticos que no tienen ninguna experiencia en la gestión sanitaria. ¿Cómo lo tienen resuelto esto en sus países?
This is a quite dangerous question in Spain. we are at risk if you answer to this question without care and without a prudent way to respond. I would let you to the final one. You know, Portugal is the oldest country in Europe with stabilized frontiers. I don't know if you have had this information. It is not useful to have fragmented systems, and in this case, the reality of Spain with the 17 regions, it's a problem because probably you have some differences and some inequalities between the regions. You are totally right. The strategy of health policy should be made by specialists without contamination of not politics, but not policies, but politics, with the influence of parties, of ideologic movements. You must have in health strategy. You must be pure. Because diseases are diseases, epidemiology is epidemiology, so pandemics are pandemics. You are fully right about that. And I believe that Spain has, in terms of public health, has a global strategy aligned with WHO, and it's quite similar to Portugal. But even in Portugal, this is one country with no problematic differences between regions. We had some difficulties with the small powers because the president of Algarve wants to have an hospital in the street of the city of Faro, and the other one in Alentejo wants the hospital in the neighborhood. So we must fight. We technicians, academic people, specialists in this field, we must help political decisions in order to avoid that this contamination between politics and policies could be made. And in the UK they have the CEO, and now in Portugal we created the CEO because we love quite very much to cope with the UK.
The UK health system is devolved. So the United Kingdom NHS chief executive, it is not connected politically. It is by law, it is a statutory independent organisation, an arm's length body, as we describe it. So, and it has its own board. To depoliticise as much as possible. Having said that, of course, health is a democratic right and something that is significantly important to any individual. So, and our democratic system is a political system. So, to go to my interpretation of your question, so I'm a hospital chief executive by background. I am not a political appointment. I am appointed through an open competition. I am not appointed by the politicians. It is a political job, of course, in terms of navigating it, but it is not politically appointed. To run a large hospital of 400 million, 500 million pounds, you need training and you need leadership development, and you need to understand that you are leading healthcare for a population of 1 million people. And you need to be able to work with clinicians. You need to be financially savvy, but you need to have training. So we have, and we need to plan our recruitment and plan our training, like the army does, in terms of investing in the skills and the leadership that is required to run any healthcare system. Part of my responsibility as a chief executive is to work with my stakeholders, whether they're internal stakeholders, whether they are patient, whether they are citizens, I totally agree, and whether they are politicians, big politicians or local politicians, but cannot replace training, leadership and development.
Bueno, ahora sí que vamos a dar por finalizada esta mesa. Sí que decirles que espero que hayan gozado de ella como he gozado yo personalmente de estar con personas tan extraordinarias como las que me acompañan. Decirles un pequeño secreto. Alguien puede decir, no, de lo que se ha hablado no corresponde con el título del panel, pero justamente como moderador lo que quería era que habláramos de los grandes retos, de los grandes problemas, de las grandes políticas que vamos a tener que implantar en los próximos años y que ustedes se hagan una pregunta: si un gobierno va a poder resolver todos estos problemas que nuestra sociedad, que nuestros ciudadanos nos reclaman desde ya, por sí solos, o van a necesitar o van a plantear líneas de colaboración, de apertura, de sumar, de plantear en común estrategias con el sector privado. Yo, desde luego, estoy convencido, creo en ello y llevo luchando muchísimos años porque el sentido común se imponga y que ante los grandísimos retos demográficos, tecnológicos, sociales, de enfermedades, poblacionales y todo, es imprescindible, hoy más que nunca, la colaboración público-privada. Muchas gracias.